to another video. Today I'm going to be finally giving you guys my review of the Sony a6700. After using it for about 6 months now, I've finally come up with a bit of a pros and cons list of the types of things that are good with the camera and then the things that, you know, maybe there's a little bit of room for improvement still. Now before I go any further, basically I am primarily shooting landscape and nature photography. I do dabble in a few other styles and genres from time to time, but primarily I'm going to focus on the features that make this camera a really good landscape camera, and then some of the other features that tie in with shooting nature, so things like wildlife, close-up shots of fungi, that kind of thing. Yes, there are quite a few good features in this camera that are really great for some people. You know, sports photographers will like the fact that it's got higher frames per second. They'll also love the fact that it's got really good, accurate autofocus. But to be honest with you, Sony cameras have had these types of features and they've been really good for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. So while those things are great and I'm happy they're in the camera, they're definitely not the reason that I bought it as a landscape and nature photographer. So I'll be talking about the other features that made this camera the one to buy for me. And believe me, there's plenty more tricks up this camera's sleeve, so stick to the end of the video and you'll see exactly why I made the change, and I'll do a brief summary at the end as well. But basically it's going to be a bit of a pros and cons, so I'll start with all the good features and then all of the things where there's a little bit of room for improvement I'll speak about at the end. The camera's not perfect, I wouldn't say, but yeah, it's up to you whether you decide if those things are cons. Some of them aren't true cons, some of them won't even matter to some people, but for me, I've separated it out into the things that I really like about the camera and the reasons that I switched in the first place, and then the things that I haven't been so keen on, basically. So without further ado, let's get into it. First things first, a little bit of a brief recap on the cameras that I've used throughout the years. In 2017, I started out photography with the Nikon D5600, and that was a great camera. It had a fully articulating touchscreen, which bear that in mind when I come onto that in a bit. But yeah, fully articulating touchscreen. It was small and lightweight, which was the other really good feature of that camera. So it didn't really weigh much to take all your gear out with you for the day. And as I progressed through photography, I ended up with heavier and heavier gear, and I ended up just not enjoying taking all that stuff with me, so I really wanted to get a smaller, lighter kit. Then in 2018 I got the Sony a7 III when it came out, and that was a really full-featured camera for me. You know, I'd only been shooting photography for 18 months or so at the time, but I knew that I could grow into that camera and that those features would really benefit me as a photographer in the end. And I went on to shoot with that camera professionally for several years and really got some great shots in that time. Then in 2019, I thought I needed a bit of a backup camera, so I got the Sony a6000, which is a pretty good camera. They don't even make it anymore, but yeah, at the time it was Sony's sort of lowest level in the aps-c line, and it was a little bit plasticky and flimsy, and the sort of menu system was very convoluted, and yeah, it wasn't very intuitive and wasn't a pleasure to use, which was the main thing. So then in 2020, I got the Sony a6400, which is actually what I'm filming you on now, and that camera was great. That was a real leap up in image quality. It had all of the sort of modern features that you wanted, bar a few, but yes, it's still a really good camera to this day, and I do recommend it to people. But there were a few things that it was still missing to make that my main camera. So bear in mind, I had the a7 III and the a6400 at this point. Then in 2021, I got the Sony a7R III, and that was a big leap up in image quality. The images that come out of that camera are truly stunning, and I really think that that is one of the best value cameras. Again, I don't think they actually make it anymore, but that is one of the best cameras that you can get if you're buying secondhand. If you're buying a full frame Sony camera, I highly recommend that. But again, there were a few features that it was missing, and it was from 2017, so it was a little bit dated. So in 2023, the a6700 came out, and this camera basically solves a lot of the issues that I had with Sony cameras. And yeah, it made me really think, you know what, I really could just have this one camera and that could do it all basically. It could really bridge that gap between APS-C and full frame. So the main things that I wanted in a camera in 2023 and now 2024 obviously, I wanted my overall kit to be smaller and lighter, and I knew that going fully to APS-C was the only way to do that. Full frame lenses, especially the really high quality G Master lenses, they're just too big and heavy. So I thought by going to APS-C, you know, I could really solve that issue and have a much smaller and lighter kit and fit everything into my backpack as and when I needed it to. The other thing is, when I print photos and put them on the wall, the biggest size that I can do with my printer is A3+. And I've been printing with the A6400 for years, and I find that those prints look just as good as the A7 III especially, but even the A7R3, they don't look far behind that either. So yeah, my biggest print, A3+, you know, the crop sensor, there's really no issue with that. So I didn't really need those high megapixels of the A7R3 and even the A7 III. So yeah, that was another big reason that I wanted to switch. So the other thing I was tempted to do was go over to Fujifilm and completely ditch all of the Sony kit and yeah, basically go with Fujifilm, because they make some great cameras and they're very fully featured. They're real pro level cameras, I would say. And they've been making great APS-C cameras for years and years, whereas Sony's APS-C cameras have been a little bit flimsy and not quite pro level until this camera came out, I think. So as I said, it just took a really long time for Sony to fully commit to the A6000 line and finally make them have all these pro features that this camera has. So let's go through the pros then. Let's talk about all of the good points that made me switch and the things that I'm really happy with over the last 6 months of using this camera. So the first thing is this, the flippy screen. Yes. So believe it or not, in 2017 when I had the Nikon D5600, it had a fully articulating touchscreen. But then when I went over to Sony, none of the cameras have had a fully functioning touchscreen and that fully articulates until the more recent ones. And this was the first APS-C one that Sony have made. They had the A6400, which had the flippy screen, and yeah, it was okay, but it wasn't a fully articulating screen, which meant that when you shoot down low to the ground, say you're shooting a wide landscape with a really cool foreground subject, if you're shooting in portrait orientation, the A6400, that kind of foldy out screen, that really doesn't do anything to help you. Whereas having this fully articulating touchscreen, you know, that allows me to get all the way down to the ground, get it as low as I can, and then still be able to articulate this screen and be able to see what the camera is capturing and make any adjustments and things like that. So yeah, it is a real shame that it took Sony so long when other manufacturers have been doing it a really long time. So yeah, finally they caught up, and that was one of the big reasons that I wanted to switch to this camera. The next thing is the bigger battery. So this camera finally has the Nikon Z battery. I know they did the A6600, which did have the battery in it, but basically this camera, or this battery, can shoot for twice as long as the older Sony batteries. So it's got basically twice the capacity. And for shooting like long days out in the cold, especially when your batteries are going to go down quicker, you know, you need that bigger battery. So yeah, this, I now have 2 batteries, and that's enough for me. You know, I have one in the camera and then I have one spare, so that's a really good plus point for this. So the next thing is, I'll leave it on the list for now, but it is up for debate because I'm saying it's weather sealing. It's got much better rated weather sealing than the other older Sony APS-C cameras. And with the A6400, I did have, when I was shooting in cold conditions, the camera would just shut down. It would just basically black out, which is a real shame when you're in the middle of a shoot and, you know, the light is fading or something like that. You really can't have your camera just shutting down because it's bad weather. There were times when I would have to literally turn it off and on again, or even take the battery out and put it back in again. And so far, I hate to say it, but it has happened once with this camera as well. So I'm hoping that it's some setting that I've maybe got wrong. You know, maybe it's some sort of energy saving setting that I've got. But yeah, I really don't want it to be a negative point of this camera, because yeah, like I said, when you're in the middle of a shoot and your camera shuts down, that's no good. So it has got better weather sealing, and I'm going to keep it on the pros list for now. But yeah, that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens over the winter and see how it fares with the colder conditions. But I have shot in the rain with it, in the absolute pouring down rain, like you couldn't get much more rain, and it stood up to it absolutely fine. So yeah, I've got no worries about shooting in the rain with this. Obviously within reason, you know, I'm not going to dunk it in the water or anything like that. But yeah, basically this camera, the weather sealing is much better than the previous A6000 line. So as I said before, it's got a proper touch screen as well. So now I can go into the menu system. I can change the menu system with the touch screen. You know, I can click on that, click on that. Before, you could do certain things, like you could change the focus point, but you couldn't go into the menu system or anything like that. So now everything works as it should. And before with the A6400, I even had to turn the touchscreen off in the end, because it had a really bad habit of my nose, especially when it was like in hot conditions, when I was sweating, my nose would end up becoming the finger, and it would be dragging the focus point around the camera, and yeah, I just couldn't do with that. So now I haven't had that issue with this. It seems to be a fully working touchscreen, doesn't have any issues. So yeah, that's a big pro for me. So the other thing about the screen is that it is now much higher resolution. So the one before on the A6400, it was okay, it wasn't that bad, but it wasn't as good as, say, the A7R3 screen, which was much brighter, much clearer, the colours were much nicer, and now this screen is just as good or better than the full frame line of Sony cameras. So yeah, I'm really happy with the EVF and with the screen. So yeah, that's a really good feature. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the IBIS. So Sony full frame cameras have had really good IBIS in them for several years. The A7 III, I really enjoyed shooting with that, and I think I got some shots when I was in Croatia where the shutter speed was almost a second, so really slow shutter speed, and the IBIS just really helps with that, keep it nice and steady. And now this has even better IBIS, and there's other features that you can do, like electronic IBIS with video, things like that. So yeah, I'm really happy with the in-body image stabilization on this. So yeah, that's a really good plus point for me. The next thing that I'll talk about is the sensor. So this sensor is 26 megapixels, so it's not the highest megapixel in the world, but it is, I think it's is either a stacked sensor or backside illuminated, I can't remember, and I don't really know what either of those mean, to be honest, but it is a really high quality sensor, and I find that the images are looking much closer to full frame than the Sony A6400, and it really bridges that gap between APS-C and full frame for me. So yeah, that's a really good feature and something that sounded really good, and it also is a great video camera as well. So 26 megapixels, again, that's not the most demanding high megapixel count in the world. So with video, it shoots really well in low light situations, and likewise with astrophotography as well. The images look great. They're not grainy, not noisy, anything like that. So yeah, I'm really happy with the sensor on this. The next thing that I want to talk about is focus bracketing, and this was a feature that I was really keen on. It's something that I hadn't had in any of my other Sony cameras before, but essentially what you do is, say you're shooting like a scene of a fungi or something quite close up. I find that focus bracketing comes in really handy, because you can focus with an autofocus lens. It has to be, can't be a manual focus lens, which is a shame, because there's some really great third-party macro lenses that are manual focus only that would be lovely to use on this camera, but it would mean that that benefit of having the focus bracketing wouldn't even be worth it with a manual focus lens. But essentially what happens is you focus on the closest part of your image, so as close as you can really, and then you set it to the focus bracketing. I usually do, I think, 100 or 200 shots, and what it does is it moves the plane of focus through the image, and basically you get 100 or 200 images, however many you want, and then the plane of focus moves further back, and you can then blend those images in Photoshop in post, and you end up with a tack sharp photo from front to back. So yeah, that's a really good feature and something that I've really enjoyed using since I got this. The next thing is something that I had on the A7 III and the A7R III, but didn't have on the A6400, and something that I really missed when shooting astrophotography, and it's bright monitoring. So essentially what bright monitoring is, it's something that you can set to one of the custom buttons. I think I've got it for C3 on the side here. But yeah, what it does is essentially bring up the ISO to the maximum ISO, and everything gets really, really bright. So what you can do, you can essentially see in the dark. So when you're shooting astrophotography, you can frame up your composition using the bright monitoring. And it's not actually changing those settings, it's just changing them for the preview that you see on your screen or the EVF. So yeah, then when you come to actually shoot your image, it will shoot with the settings that you actually have dialed in. But yeah, for that framing up, I just find it so helpful when doing astrophotography. So that was something that I was really, really happy to see in this camera, because it was something that I neglected to think about until I bought it, and then all of a sudden I thought, oh, I wonder if it has bright monitoring, and it did. So yeah, that was a nice little bonus for me. And it's something that I haven't really heard many other people talk about in their reviews of this camera. So yeah, bright monitoring, it does have it, and it works really well on this camera. So yeah, I'm really happy to see that it's got it. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is the mode dial. So number one, it's got two of these dials, one on the front, one on the back. The A6400 again only had one on the back, so yeah, it didn't have that front one there, which was a shame. But now it's got those two. Basically, I can control aperture with one, shutter speed with one, and then ISO with the wheel like that. So yeah, that works really well for me. I would like a little joystick there, because the A7 line does. So it would be nice to have a joystick, but it's not the end of the world. Basically what I do instead of the joystick is I do one click on the center button, and then that brings up my focus selector box. And then I can just use the up, down, left and right on the wheel, and then that can take me to wherever I want to set the box. Then I press the center button again, and then I'm there, I'm ready to focus on it. So yeah, that's something that I would like on there, actually. That could go on the cons list, to be honest. That selector joystick. Oh, actually, I tell a lie, there's another good feature. I've got the AF on button at the back set to the focus tracking. So basically what it does is you put your subject in a box when you're looking through the EVF, and you press the AF on button when your subject is in that box, and it locks onto the subject. So that's a really good feature, and something that I didn't have in any of the other cameras before. I don't know how long Sony have been putting that in their cameras, but yeah, that's something that I've really enjoyed using, actually. It's a whole different way of focusing for me. So yeah, that's something that I really think is a great feature. But the thing I want to talk about is the fact that it's so easy to switch between video and photo, making this a really great hybrid camera. So I can set up my custom modes. I've got 1, 2 and 3, and I can have separate custom modes for photo or video, whereas with any of my Sony cameras before, it was one. I think the max I had was 3 custom modes, and to get any more you'd have to go into the menu system. It was really convoluted, and now I can, with the flick of a switch, I can go from photo to video, and then I know I've got 3 different custom modes for photography, 3 different custom modes for videography. So yeah, the ones for photography, you can have like a sports mode where you're shooting with a really fast shutter speed. You can maybe do something with the IBIS to make it a bit more reactive. Then you can have a landscape mode where, you imagine that everything's shut down on a tripod, and you can have it automatically set to f8 or f11, whatever you choose. And then you could have like an astrophotography mode. So yeah, that's a really good feature. And then likewise, you can switch over to video, and then you can be shooting 24 frames a second in custom mode 1. Then custom mode 2 can be 60 frames a second, and then with this camera now it shoots 120 frames a second, so you could have that in custom mode 3. So yeah, that's a really good feature, to be able to quickly switch between those and to have photo and video separate. That I think is really great and really valuable to me. So we've talked about the really good features on the camera, and there's probably quite a few that you can choose between there, but there are a few negatives, I hate to say, as well. So we will have to go through a few of the cons, and I don't think that they're deal breakers, a lot of them, but it's worth bearing in mind if you're thinking about buying this camera, or you've just bought it and you're looking at all the features that it has. So yeah, let's go through the cons and we'll see what there is. The first con, might not be a con for everyone, but it was for me, is the eye cup. So as you can see, this now no longer has an eye cup because it came off. Straight away, when I was putting it in and out of my bag, I was noticing that the eye cup was coming off really easily. The clips didn't seat down like hard enough. So the A6400, that eye cup seems fine. I've never had an issue with it coming off too easily. But this one, it came off and off and off, and in the end I lost it because it just came off and I wasn't paying attention and I don't know where it went. So yeah, that's a shame. But again, maybe not a deal breaker. And you might not find that on your A6700, yours might be absolutely fine. But for me, yes, that's a con because I've lost it and I've got to buy a new one now. The next con is not necessarily a con with this camera, but more so in terms of a lot of mirrorless cameras with flippy screens. So as you can see, this camera doesn't come out of the box with all of this metal work around it. That is something that I've had to put on afterwards. I was really used to shooting with an L bracket, so a piece of metal that came down one side and along the bottom and screwed into the camera, and it means that you can switch, oh, there's my watch, excuse me. Yeah, it means that you can switch between landscape orientation and portrait orientation, and then you can, quickly switch back if you need to. But with an L bracket, that works really well. The only trouble is when you use an L bracket with these flippy screen cameras, the screen can't flip out properly. So I have had to do this sort of Franken camera thing, and this is a small rig cage. And it basically goes all the way around the camera. Makes it quite a bit bigger and bulkier. It really doesn't matter that much for my style of photography, and I've sort of forgotten about it now. But yeah, it is a shame that you have to kind of come up with these solutions, really. But it feels good in the hand still, don't get me wrong. But it does mean that then you have to have a peak design clip on the bottom and on the side as well. So yeah, it makes it quite big and bulky, and yeah, not ideal really when you want everything to be as small and light as possible like me. But yeah, it does work well, but not ideal. And like I say, it isn't just the A6700 that has this issue. Fujifilm cameras, other Sony full frame mirrorless cameras, they got the same issue, where basically, you just have that compromise. And I'm sure, other people have all their different ways of dealing with it, and some people it doesn't even matter because they don't even use an L bracket, but I do, and I really liked that way of shooting, so I've had to come up with this solution, and for the most part it works. So yeah, that's a con for me, I'm afraid. The next thing is something that isn't a con most of the time, and it's probably not going to be the end of the world, 99.9% of the time, but it's the fact that it's only got one card slot. So with two card slots, you can shoot one load of images to one card, and then you can shoot back up to the other card, or you could maybe do video to one card, photo to another card, and it works really well having two card slots. And the A7 line, those cameras had it, so it is a bit of a downgrade to go to a camera that only has one card slot, but like I said, it's really not something that you think about all the time, and for the most part, it doesn't have any issues. It's only going to be that rare occasion where all of my images or my video kind of fails from this, and then I'm going to be really kicking myself the fact that I haven't got a backup. But for now, I'm dealing with it and it's okay. So yeah, again, it is a con, I'm afraid. The next thing is purely personal preference, but when I think about it, the fact that this camera is a rangefinder style, I do actually really like it. But if I had to choose, I do prefer the A7 line of cameras. That kind of classic camera shape, I think, is slightly nicer than having the rangefinder style. But it is something that I'm used to, and to be honest, I do like it most of the time. But if I had to choose, I would choose the A7 line. But obviously that comes at a price, and it is bigger and heavier. So yeah, this is the best compromise for now. So yeah, again, it's a con, but might not be for you if you like this rangefinder style of body. So the next one, I would like higher megapixels. This has 26. There are there are aps-c cameras that have 40 megapixel sensors now, and that would be lovely actually. I think if this camera had 40 megapixels, it would give out some amazing images, but that would come with the downside that it wouldn't be as good in low light, and the imperfections in certain lenses would show up more with higher megapixels as well. But for the most part, you know, it's okay. 26 megapixels is pretty good, and it is a slight jump up from the 24 that the A6400 had. So yeah, would like a few more megapixels, but it's not the end of the world. The next con is something that affects me, but it might not affect you. It's the fact that it has 10-bit color. So this camera can shoot video in 10-bit, which basically means that there's a wider gamut of color to choose from, and the color will be much more accurate. I didn't know when I bought the camera. With the free version of DaVinci Resolve, you can't use 10-bit color. You have to buy the Pro version, basically. So I don't want to buy the Pro version at the moment anyway. So I'm back to shooting the video that I shoot with this camera in 8-bit because of that. So it's kind of a feature that is pretty lost on me, and it will be lost on most non-professional videographers because, you know, why are you going to pay to use a piece of software that basically, you know, is only a little bit of an improvement over 8-bit. There's plenty of people that probably will shoot me down on that, but I don't see it as a big improvement, and it's not something that I want to pay for the Pro version of DaVinci Resolve for. So yeah, that 10-bit color is lost on me, I'm afraid. And the last feature that I would like this camera to have, but it doesn't, is a sensor cover. So I really like in some of the Canon in some of the Canon and I think Nikon cameras. So they have a feature when you undo the lens and bring it to this position, I think automatically there's a cover that goes over the sensor, which means it's protected. But these Sony cameras still don't have it. I don't know whether the A7R5 might, I'm not sure. But I'm sure it's coming at some point, but it hasn't reached this one yet. So that would be a really nice feature to have for when you're changing lenses in like sea spray. You know, you really don't want that salt water going on the sensor. Maybe in like sandy conditions as well, you really wouldn't want that. So yeah, it's a shame it's not in there, but it you know, that's going to be my last con. So yeah, that's it. That's all the cons. So overall then, this camera, would I recommend it? Yes, I would. Yeah, basically it solved so many issues for me. You know, it's allowed me to ditch full frame completely and shoot with aps-c and have confidence in the system as well. So yeah, it's allowed me to go down to a smaller backpack and shoot with lighter gear, which I wanted to do for years. It's allowed me to, you know, if I wanted to, I could only have this camera and I could be shooting this video right now with this camera, and it shoots great video. So yeah, it just it also bridges the gap for me. So the image quality is just that little bit closer to full frame. So it's never going to match up completely with a full frame camera, but it is that little bit closer. By the way, if you want to see how it compares to the Sony A7R3, which, like I said, is one of the best value, best sort of image quality for the lowest amount of money that I think you can buy today, if you buy it used especially. Yeah, if you want to see that video of how it compares to that, that's coming next week probably. So yeah, stay tuned to the channel and subscribe if you haven't already. That'd be much appreciated. So yeah, stay tuned for that. That'd be a good head-to-head, and let's see exactly how the image quality stacks up. So I think that'll probably about do it for today, to be honest. Yeah, let me know if you think any of those comments that I made about the camera were unfair. You know, some of those cons you might not agree with. Also, let me know if you think that, you know, those pros that I gave you, those were good reasons to buy the camera. I'd be interested to see what people think. I know it's a really popular camera, and yeah, probably one of Sony's most popular aps-c cameras for years. And it is kind of a do-it-all camera, so I know people are very happy with it. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. So that's about it. Yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Join me next week, probably when I have the Sony A6700 going against the Sony A7R3. I'll be out in the field, and then I'll come back and I'll probably do a little bit of a side-by-side comparison of the images. And it's going to be a real-world comparison as well, because Obviously, if straight out of camera, I'm sure the A7R3 will look better than this, but then with a bit of editing and stuff, I'm sure this can look really good as well. So yeah, join me next week and you can find out. Let's see how it does. So yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. And I'll see you soon. Bye.